Um, Hi, everyone. This is Lisa. I hope you're doing well. Glad to see some of you participating today. On behalf of the DeGroote School of Business, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Long and Zia Sumar. They are with the Long Manguji Immigration Law Group, and they have very kindly offered today to provide this opportunity for our in-course students to learn a little bit more about the postgraduate work permit process. I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth. She'll explain, I believe she has a brief presentation, and then there'll be an opportunity to have some of your questions answered. So thank you and welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. Very glad to be here with you all today. So let's get started. So today what we're going to talk about is, first of all, we're going to talk about your status as a student, how to maintain your status, what you need to do, how you can work legally, what are the conditions of working legally while you are a student. Then we're going to move on to talking about how to apply for your postgrad work permit. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to qualify for permanent residence. I always like to start with talking about some basic principles of what you need to know before you get your permanent residence. As temporary residents, one of the most important concepts that you have to understand is called implied status. So let's say I have a study permit and it expires, let's say end of April 30th of this year. Now I want to continue to study. So I'm going to, if I apply to extend my status before April 30th, the website says 30 days, but it's a recommendation, it's not the law. The law is as long as you submit your application before your status expires, you can continue on with that status. You can continue on with your study permit status, and you can, until a decision is made. So especially during COVID times, sometimes the offices are still processing, but oftentimes this can be longer processing than normal. So let's say you don't get a decision until September of this year. Well, if you submitted the application before your study permit expires, let's say I submit my application even April 29, right? And I don't get a decision until September 1st. I don't get a study permit until September 1st. Well, I can still work during the summer because I would have extended my study permit status until I get a new study permit. Okay, so that's called implied status. Now, what if I forgot to extend it in time? What if on May 1st, I think, oh my gosh, shoot, when does my study permit expire? And I look at it and shoot, it expired yesterday. What do I do then? Now you do have an opportunity to file what's called a restoration of status. So you don't necessarily need to leave the country yet. You can file a restoration of status within 90 days of losing your status. But the difference between that one day, if you had applied before your status expired, and if you apply after your status expired, is if you apply after your status expires, you don't have implied status. You don't have any status until you have your new study permit. So if I don't apply to extend my study permit before April 30th, and let's say I apply on May 1st, and I don't get a decision, I don't get a study permit until September 1st. Can I work in the summer? No, I cannot, because I don't have status until I have the new study permit. So that's a big difference, okay? Make sure when you go home, you check your study permit and make sure you notify yourself on your phone, several times as to when that status ends. This applies when you have your work permit, it applies if you have visitor status, anytime you have temporary status, okay? Now, you also only get implied status if you apply properly. Applying properly means that you cannot, if you submit the wrong forms, if you submit the wrong fees, they would, say that you're not, it's counted as if you haven't even applied at all. So in that case, let's say I had applied to extend my status on April 30th, but oops, I forgot to attach the right passport. I attached my old passport, and my study permit is rejected on September 1st. If I applied properly, I would have extended my status to September 1st, and I get 90 days from that day of the rejection to apply for restoration of status. But let's say I didn't submit the right fee. If I didn't submit the right fee, it's as if I didn't submit the application to extend at all. And therefore, the restoration period starts counting when my study permit expired, not when I get the notification that I didn't apply properly, okay? All right, so the second concept I want you guys to keep in mind is the difference between high-skilled and low-skilled positions. In Canada, we have a classification system that was put into place by the Labor Department. It's called the National Occupation Classification System, the NOC codes. And essentially what the government has done is they have tried to classify all occupations into 5 different categories. O, A, and B are high-skilled, and C and D are low-skilled. Immigration has taken this and basically worked out an immigration system that really values high-skilled work over low-skilled work. You will find when we talk about permanent residence that for the most part, applying for permanent residence, your chances are really only there when you are applying for, when you have worked in high-skilled positions. There are a few low-skilled ones, but they're very, very specific to the occupation, okay? So what's high-skilled, what's low-skilled? Let's play a little game, okay? I'm gonna say some occupation, you guess whether or not it's high-skilled or low-skilled. Let's start with an office situation. If you're a receptionist, is that high-skilled or low-skilled? Low-skilled. Secretary, high-skilled. Bookkeeper, high-skilled. Accounting clerk, low-skilled. Data entry clerk, low-skilled. Medical assistant, high-skilled. Dental assistant, low-skilled. Okay, I don't know how many you were able to guess, but I'm thinking that a lot of you may have gotten some of those wrong. So the point I'm trying to make is don't just assume that a occupation is high-skilled or low-skilled. You have to go to the classification system to make sure that the work that you're going to do or the work that you've done is classified as high-skilled. All right, let's move on to talking about your status while you are a student. In order to maintain your student status, it's not enough that you have a valid study permit. Even if you have a valid study permit, you lose your status within 90 days from when you actively pursue, when you've stopped actively pursuing studies. Okay, what is actively pursuing studies? Well, it's when you go to class, okay? There are 2 other things that could also include actively pursuing studies when you don't go to class, right? So I'm talking about going to class or also co-op studies as well, if you're doing your co-op terms as well. That's actively pursuing studies. But also scheduled breaks are actively pursuing studies. What is a scheduled break? A scheduled break is something that it appears on the school calendar. Okay, for example, summer breaks, that's the most normal scheduled break. Now, during COVID times, sometimes classes are canceled. Is that a scheduled break? The immigration is saying that's actually not normally considered a scheduled break. Okay, it's still, you're still actively pursuing studies, okay, but just because classes are canceled doesn't mean that it's a scheduled break. What that means is when we talk about working, is that you shouldn't assume that you can work full-time just because your classes are canceled. You can still work part-time off campus, but unless it's in the school calendar, then you shouldn't assume that you can work full-time on a scheduled break. Okay, the second way is authorized leave. Now, authorized leave are very individualized leaves for people who maybe have a medical issue or some other issues where they have to take a leave of absence from the school. Now, this is something that you must get special leave from the school. You can't just say, oh, I'm taking a break, right? You have to get special leave from the school in order to do so. For the most part, COVID in and of itself is not enough. Maybe if you yourself have COVID and you need a medical break, then you can probably get an authorized leave. But just because the school cancels classes does not make that an authorized leave. If you are going to take an authorized leave, it has to be counted as an authorized leave where you're still actively pursuing studies. It has to be within 150 days. Now, during the authorized leave, you're not allowed to work at all. You can't work full-time, you can't work part-time. Okay, so you also need to maintain your status, okay? Just because we have COVID does not mean that the government is going to give you a break and say you don't have to apply for extensions if your status is about to expire. Apply online right now. Online is the way to go. Apply to submit your application properly before your status expires, okay? And so you can certainly do that. And if you do it before your status expires, then you have implied status. So even if you don't get the new study permit before your old study permit expires, as long as you've applied, you're good to, as long as you remain in Canada, you're good to continue on with your status. Working while you're studying, okay? So you can only work while you are a full-time student, okay? The only exception is in the last semester, if some people, they just need to do 1 or 2 more classes to finish the program, immigration recognizes that, and so you can still work in the last semester if you're a part-time student. But other than that, if you're a part-time student at any other time, you cannot work. Okay, well, certainly during scheduled breaks you can work, but you're still a full-time student during scheduled breaks, okay? Once you've completed your studies, when I say completed your studies, it means the first indication by the school that you've completed your studies. Maybe you receive your transcript. Maybe you get a letter from the school. The first indication, it's not normally when you receive the degree in hand, okay? That first indication, you're no longer a student and you have to stop working. You have to stop working full-time, you have to stop working part-time. The only exception is if you finish one program and then you're going to go on to another program and you've already been accepted to the second program and the time in between is less than 150 days. In that case, then you can work in between the programs on a full-time basis. During COVID, right now, it does appear that the immigration is not giving students a break. If your classes are being canceled during the term, you can work part-time, okay? Unless immigration, it seems we've had some indication from the officers that is their expectation, that you are working part-time because it's not determined to be a scheduled break yet, okay? Until you get to your summer scheduled break, you still are expected to work can only work part-time. Okay, let's talk about post-grad work permits. The post-grad work permit, I call it a golden ticket. Why is it a golden ticket? Because it is one of those work permits. There's only very, very small number of categories where you can have an open work permit. You can work anywhere you like. And the employers, they don't have to do anything to support your work permit, okay? There are very few work permits like that. And for the post-grad work permit, you only get one golden ticket in your lifetime, okay? So you can't, once your work permit expires, people ask me, oh, how do I extend my work permit? Well, the answer is, well, maybe you can't. Most students probably wouldn't, have a difficulty to do it. You have to qualify for work permit in order to extend it. So it's very important that you calculate properly, okay? Because you can only qualify for a postgrad work permit once in your lifetime, you have to think about, well, how long is my postgrad work permit going to be? If you have completed a 2-year program, when I say a 2-year program, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a 2 calendar year program. It could be a 2 academic year program that is really only 18 months in total, right? Or 16 months in total of the time that you are going to classes, but because you don't have the scheduled breaks, it's equal to 2 academic years, okay? But that's very important to know, because normally, if it's under 2 academic years, then you only get that length of time. So if some programs are only 18 months, the officer might give you 18-month work permit only. But if your program is a 2-year program, you're supposed to get a 3-year work permit. That's a big, big difference, okay? If you've only completed a 1-year program and you need a 3-year work permit. Now, not everybody will need a 3-year work permit. Some people may not, okay? But if you do need a 3-year work permit, if you only have completed a 1-year program, you may not want to apply for the 2nd year program yet. You may not want to apply for the postgrad work permit yet, because you only get a 1-year postgrad work permit. If you complete another 1-year program at a public college or university, then you can access the 3-year work permit. Another issue with the postgrad work permit is you have to have maintained full-time status at school during each semester of the program. The stated exception is the final semester. Now, that is what was the policy before we entered into COVID era. If your classes are canceled because of COVID, I suspect that immigration will be sympathetic to that and still allow you to get a postgrad work permit at the end, okay? But this has to be very, very clearly delineated. If online courses are available, go and take the online courses. Try to maintain your full-time status at school at all times. Immigration can get pretty big sticklers about this, okay? Now, I put this on before because distance education, it does not disqualify you if the total amount, it will disqualify you if the total amount is over 50%. Immigration has said that they may make some exceptions for online courses, but that is not necessarily clear right now. Online, it still says that it has to be under 50%. So if your situation is that it's over 50%, you may want to, you may need to make some extra provisions for that and discuss that, because that, we thought it was clear, but now it's a little bit unclear again. Surprise, surprise, it's immigration. This is our life, okay? Here's a very important thing about working, okay? You can work full-time as long as you apply for your post-grad work permit if your study permit is still valid and it's within 90 days of the completion of your program. Now, the website says you can apply for your post-grad work permit within 180 days, and that's fine. But the problem is you will lose your student status within 90 days of completing your studies, okay? And in order to work while waiting for your work permit, you have to have study permit status. So that is why I give you this rule. Apply the earlier of, your deadline is the earlier of your study permit expiring or 90 days of the completion of your program, whichever comes first. This is really important because during COVID times, you can't even go to the border anymore to apply for your work permit. You have to apply online, and it can take quite a few months to get your work permit. So if you want to start working for an employer who offers you a job and you don't have your work permit yet, you can apply for your work permit and then you can start working, but only within this rule that I'm giving you. All right, let's talk about permanent residence. The first thing I want to talk about is express entry. This is a category that many of you probably will have heard of. We'll go through it first, and then I have some other non-express entry options for you as well. Okay, so express entry, how does it work? First, you have to create an online profile, and you can create an online profile if you qualify for express entry under one of three categories: the skilled worker class, Canadian experience class, or the skilled trades class. Once you qualify, you create a profile, you get into the express entry pool. Now, this does not mean that you have applied for your permanent residence, okay? You cannot apply just because you're in the pool. Once you get in the pool, though, you will get a score. It's called the CRS score, and it's going to be points based on your background and whether or not you have provincial nomination. Every 2 weeks or so, the government has a draw where they announce a number. If your number is above that number, then you'll get finally an invitation to apply, and you can actually apply. If your score is below that draw number, then you cannot apply. Okay, and you stay in the pool. So the point of the express entry is you not only have to get in the pool, you also have to get out. All right, let's first talk about how to get into the pool. The first category that I'm going to talk about is called the skilled worker class, federal skilled worker class. And it's for people who don't necessarily have Canadian experience. I have clients who get through express entry and they get their permanent residence even if they have never stepped foot in Canada. What's required for this is 1 year of high-skilled, continuous work experience in one occupation that's full-time. Okay, let's break that down. 1 year of high-skilled, I've talked about that, knock O, A, and B. Full-time is calculated as 30 hours a week. If you did 2 years of part-time of 15 hours a week, you can do that. That will add it on together. But don't get clever and think, oh, well, I work 60 hours and for 6 months. Now, you still have to have at least 1 year of high-skilled work experience, 1,560 hours, which is equal to 30 times 52. And then you have to have it in one occupation, okay? It doesn't have to be in the same employer, but it has to be the same occupation for at least 1 year. So notice that I didn't talk about it needing to be in Canada. You can use the work experience from outside of Canada. I also didn't say that it couldn't be work experience that you gained while you are a student. It absolutely can be work experience. I have grad students who, who have TARA experience that can get it, or they have work experience, from internships and etc. But one of the issues with co-op is it may not be continuous. So if it's not continuous, then I can't use it to qualify you for that 1 year of work experience there. Okay. Other than the work experience, and you can also be self-employed to qualify as well. Now, other than this, there are other aspects to it. You have to pass a language exam. I'm sure all of you would pass this level of language exam. And then it's a 6 in IELTS, really. Now, this language is not about the level that you need to get out of the pool. I'm just talking about getting into the pool right now. Then we take a look at your other background situation, and you have to total to around 67 points. You also need to have adequate financial savings as well. Okay, so this is the federal skilled worker class. The points that I talk about to equal to 67 points is not the CRS points that you get when you get in the pool. It's very different. For the most part, if you guys have that work experience, you'll have your masters in Canada, etc., you will usually qualify under this class without Canadian experience. Second one is a Canadian experience class. So this one is very different from the skilled worker class. In order to qualify under this, you have to have work experience in Canada that is high skilled within 3 years of application. 1 year of high skilled work experience in Canada when you're not a full-time student, and it's legal, okay, and you have to be employed. You have to be an employee. So what's the difference between an employee and a contractor? Well, it has to do a lot with your taxes. So when you get a pay stub as an employee in Canada, you'll see that you have your income tax deducted, you'll have your EI, CPP, etc. deducted. If you're a contractor, you won't have that deducted. Okay, so that's something that's very important when you're looking at this, because even though you can qualify to get into the pool under either one of these categories, the Canadian experience class, for that work experience that I just described, you can get points for that. It's the same kind of Canadian experience points that you get under the CRS. Okay. There's another one, which is a skilled trades, and that's more for people in the construction or cooks and chefs. So what happens is once you qualify, you get into the pool. Now, I have 4 people here, right? Last draw was 455, I believe. 455, but only for those people who qualified for the Canadian experience class. So who can get an invitation to apply? Well, Trupti, maybe, okay? Because maybe Trupti got in as under the federal skilled worker class. If she did, then she wouldn't have been issued an invitation to apply in the last draw. Now, this is a very interesting situation because in the past few years, history, the government has not differentiated between skilled workers and Canadian experience class until March. When COVID hit, somehow the determination was that the government wanted to limit the draws to people who were in Canada with Canadian experience. So they limited the draws to Canadian experience class. That is why the points, which had been in the 470s have been dropping rapidly to the 455 and probably will continue to drop as well, but it's only for Canadian experience class. This may very well go back to both categories or all categories by after the COVID is over. It remains to be seen, but it's quite interesting. Okay, so let's talk about what gives you those points to get into the pool. The first one is age. Age is a big differentiator. I like to say when it is your 30th birthday, it is no longer a happy birthday, okay? When you are in your 30s, every time it's your birthday, your points go down by 5 or 6 points. When you get to your 40s, it's a fast slide down, -10, -11. By the time you get to your 45th birthday, the good news is it doesn't go down anymore. The bad news is it's at 0. So 0 compared to someone in their 20s where you get 110 points is a big difference. Not a lot you can do about age except apply as early as possible. Education is very important. If you have 2 degrees, such as a master's, your points will jump, okay? Language is also a big differentiator. Normally for language points, we're looking at 7s in reading, writing, and speaking, and 8 in listening if you don't have any Canadian experience. Work experience, Canadian work experience is also important. That is the work experience I was describing as part of the Canadian experience class work experience, okay? But this is within 10 years of application. Canadian experience class, to qualify, it's within 3 years of application. Foreign work experience, if you have work experience outside of Canada, that can get you up to 50 points. If you've worked 3 years or more, 1 year or more, it can, get you certain points. So it's certainly an important factor. If you are married, if you have a super spouse, if they have a high level of language points and their education is good and they have some work experience, you may be able to get a few more points. Provincial nominee programs. Now these are programs specific to each province, and they have to, in order to get you points for this, they have to be an express entry based program. We're going to talk about the ones for Ontario in just a bit. If you studied in Canada, if you have your master's in Canada, you get 30 points. Arranged employment. So you don't get arranged employment if you have an open work permit like your postgrad work permits. These are only for those people who have employer-specific work permits or LMIAs. If you have a sibling who's a Canadian permanent resident in Canada, you get 15 points for that. Ability to speak fluent French, you will get significant points. French speakers are very lucky. If you are a French speaker, let me know because there are different ways to get you work permits and permanent residence. Trade certification, this is more for people who are in the construction trades or cooks and chefs. Okay, so looking at that list, some of you may be very happy, others may not be so happy. Okay, so let's talk about other ways to increase those points for express entry. So how the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, this is the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program, works is that you can't apply directly to them for express entry streams. For those that increase the express entry points, you have to first be in the pool and then they come and select you. Okay, it's kind of like online dating Bumble. I think I've never tried it. I'm too old for that, but I think that's how Bumble works, right? So the guys can't approach the women directly, the women have to go after them. So this is the same thing. You can't go to the government and say, I want to apply for this. They have to come to you first and say, okay, we're interested. Now come and apply with us if you like. Okay? So, categories. The first category of people they might be interested in is called the human capital stream. In order to qualify for the human capital stream, what do you have to have? I'm not sure. They have said that they want to be flexible with this category. So at one point, they were inviting everybody over a certain number of points. And then they realized, okay, that's too broad. So then they at one point said people who had job offers in Ontario. Other times they have specified certain occupations. They have said something which set something up which they call the tech draws. Tech draws are for people who are in the tech sector. They have tech, they have some experience in those occupations, etc. And they usually announce that they're going to invite people to apply in those categories. But they still have to have over a certain number of points, 450s, 430s, etc. Okay. The second one is for French speakers. So if you can speak French, and let's say you don't have enough points to get through Express Entry pool by yourself, then they may invite you to apply with them for 600 more points. Okay, so those are some of the categories there. Let's now move on to something that is not Express Entry. The first one I want to talk about is the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program for employer-based. So these are programs where you have a job offer in Canada, in Ontario. In order to qualify, your employer has to first qualify. So if it's the employer's in the GTA, they must have a gross income of $1 million, be in business for at least 3 years, and have 5 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees in the location where you're working at. Outside of the GTA, and Hamilton is outside of the GTA, which is very nice. The employer just has to have a gross income of over 500,000, have at least 3 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees, and be in business for 3 years. The job offer has to be full-time and permanent. Okay, so this is the basis of this program. If you have to have an employer to offer you this job. Now, if you are an international student and you must apply within 2 years of graduation, okay, then your job is high skilled. The salary only needs to meet entry-level wage for the occupation, which is very easy to meet. I haven't ever seen a case where there was an issue with that, okay? But if this is the case, then you can apply for permanent residence. Simple, right? Notice I didn't talk about language exams or age or work experience. You don't have to have any work experience in order to qualify for this. Now, the thing is though, you do have, in order to qualify for this, not to qualify, but in order to apply for this, you have to apply when the program is open. Because Express Entry points have been quite high in the past year or so, a lot of people have been applying to this category. As a result, I mean, before it was open for several months, most of the year for the most part. Last year it closed, it was open from February to May. This year when it opened, it was only open for a few minutes really before it closed. And even if you were on there during that time that it was open, it was very, very difficult to get through the system. So essentially, right now we don't know if this program is going to reopen or not. It could be a little bit difficult to get a spot under this program. This is something that we need to take a closer look at. Zia is going to be hosting a program with the OINP directors for lawyers in a few weeks' time. And one of the questions we are always asking that they don't usually want to give assurances on whether or not it's going to open, but it all depends on how many people are going to be applying for this, because the OINP, they do have a quota from the federal government as to how many people they can nominate in their programs. However, the fact that the Canadian Experience class points have been dropping significantly may mean that there may be less people who are going to apply for this, and there will be more of a chance maybe next year to get through. Okay. Now, if you can't get through under the international student class, you may also be able to get through under the skilled worker class. The difference between the skilled worker and the international student is you don't have to, for the skilled worker, apply within 2 years of graduation, but the wage has to meet median salary wage for the occupation, and you must have 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in the occupation. It doesn't have to be in Canada. It could be anywhere in the world, but it has to be in the same occupation as your job offer. There is also the master's and PhD streams. Now, recently, the master's stream in the past few years has gotten, I would say, pretty ridiculous. It's kind of like trying to buy a ticket, that elusive ticket on Ticketmaster, okay? Basically, the master's streams in the past few years have opened and closed like that. Even if you're online trying to get a spot, it can be very, very difficult to get a spot, okay? That is because the master's stream in Ontario, as long as if you graduated from a master's program in Ontario, you don't need a job offer, you can just apply, okay? All right, so let's talk about some next steps. What should you do if you'd like to apply for permanent residence? The first thing you need to do is have a plan. What we're doing today is we're just giving you guys a general idea, general layout of the land. But as to what each of you need to do, that is something that we can certainly do with you in a consultation where we go through the specific things that you need to do to get to your PR. Okay, so you need a good plan. You need a map to where you're going. Then you need to know. Then you need to just do it, right? Oftentimes you might need to study and take the practice exams or the IELTS, right? Doing the IELTS or the CELPIP, French exams, etc. It's not something that is just it just adjudicates your real ability in a language. It really looks at whether or not you know how to write the exam. So make sure you practice for these. Even if English or French is your first language, you don't know how many people whose only language is English, their first language is English, they have your master's degrees, they can't get the marks that I need for them to get through express entry, okay? Study and practice this. Make sure that the programs that you're taking, you can get the postgrad work permit for the length of time that you need to, right? Etc. So do know what the plan is, do what you need to do when you get there. Make sure you stay in status, no excuses, okay? Immigration is very unsympathetic. They're not sympathetic to you, okay? Even if you say, oh, I had COVID, I couldn't extend it, I don't think so, okay? You're not gonna be able to work without status. Then you'll be working illegally, okay? Unless I don't know, maybe you're in the hospital, I would still get someone to get you to sign it and submit it for you, okay? Like, you gotta get yourself in status. Make sure you stay in status and don't wait until the last minute, because oftentimes, the system breaks down at the last minute online, okay? You can't get through, okay? Don't leave it until the last minute. Make sure you do it with plenty of time. If your application is rejected, contact a lawyer right away, okay? There's a very, very short window of time that you can file a federal court notice. There are different strategies as to how to deal with a rejection, okay? Sometimes it is not your fault. It's the officer's wrong decision. Now, if that's the case, we can file a federal court notice, okay? If we do it within 15 days, and we can ask for the reasons. And sometimes the minister's office, the lawyer for the minister may say, oh yeah, this is actually the officer's mistake. We're going to just go back and we're going to concede, okay? So that's something that often happens if it is the officer's mistake. We can ask for reconsideration. If you get a rejection, you call the call center, the immigration call center, they're going to say, oh, write a letter in, okay? If you go and just write a letter in and it is rejected, and then you come to me and say, oh, you know, it was rejected, even if I write a really, really good letter for you, immigration may not even look at it, because they say you can only submit one reconsideration, and that person already had the chance for reconsideration. So you can't submit another one, okay? You may also need to file a restoration of status. Remember I said, you know, if you lose your status, you can file restoration of status. Well, that restoration status is also a very short period of time. It's 90 days, okay? So think about these things. And I'm going to put up our contact information on there. We always offer DeGroote students a special discount if you for your consultation, if you wanted to come and meet with us about your own special circumstances. We have a COVID-19 update page where we try to update on new information on COVID-19. This is, you know, changing all the time. We're, you know, on there changing several times a week often, because as new news and the policies change, etc. Okay, so check that out. We do tweet and, you know, on express entry draws. Every time there's an express entry draw, Zia will put up a new tweet on express entry draws. But more than that, a lot of different kinds of news for immigration we put out on our social media. Okay, all right, Zia, are you ready for some questions?
We are. We've gotten some great questions.
Okay.
So the first one, Elizabeth, how early can you apply for an extension of your study permit?
That's a good question. Normally, I recommend maybe 4 to 5 months before you can submit it. You know, even if it's a little bit earlier than that because of COVID, you can certainly just, you know, put it in. I wouldn't wait until the last minute to do your study permits, because, you know, right now it could take several months for you to get that new study permit.
Perfect. And what about, so when you're applying for the post-graduation work permit, if you're here with your family, so let's say you have a spouse, children here, can they apply for, like, does their status get extended as well? What do they apply for? What do you need?
Yes, that's right. So if you are married or you're common law with someone, you've lived someone for at least a year, and they're you know, they're not a Canadian or permanent resident, they can get their work permit when you're a student, when you have your study permit. Now, in order for them to extend that spousal work permit, you will have to have a high-skilled job offer and be working there in order for them to get to extend their work permit. If not, then they can extend based on a visitor status, and so can your children as well. They can extend their visitor status as well. They can also extend study permits if they need to, but if they're school age, they don't actually, if they're in Canada, they don't actually need a study permit. They just need visitor status if they're going to anything, high school and below. Okay.
So you mentioned that, so if I was a student and I was applying for the post-graduation work permit, I would need to have a high-skilled job offer in order for my spouse to get the open spousal work permit.
Yes, that's
Do
right.
I already have to be working in that position?
It's best if you are working in that position. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And while I'm applying for my work permit, can I travel while it's in processing? Can I come back to Canada?
So that's a good question.
Aside from everything to do with COVID.
It's a really good question. So watch the travel bans very carefully. Right now, if you must travel, if you don't need to travel, don't travel. Like on vacation, etc. It's a real pain in the just to come back. Okay, but if you must travel, workers are usually able to travel to come back into Canada. You do have to show the airline, and this is another issue, right? It's not officers who look at this, it's airlines, and airline officers are, they're not officers, airline agents are often not very knowledgeable, but you're supposed to, if you show them your work permit, you're supposed to be able to get on that plane. Okay. Now, if you have your, you're applying for your postgrad work permit, you don't have your work permit yet, don't leave. Okay. Because implied status expires after your, if you leave Canada, implied status expires and you may not be able to get your work permit. So stay in Canada, wait and get your work permit. If you need a visa, you'll have to apply for a visa afterwards that will be valid for the length of time as your work permit. With your visa, with your work permit, during normal life, okay, travel, no problem. But until you get that work permit and get your visa, if you need a visa. If you don't need a visa, you can use your ETA. But, during these times, though, try to stay put if possible. Okay.
And when I'm looking at the length of my post-graduation work permit, is it dependent on the length of program, or what if I complete my program faster? So if I accelerate my studies, will my post-grad work permit then be shortened?
If you've accelerated your program and it's clearly stated that you've accelerated the regular program, you should still get it based on the regular program, the work permit based on the regular program. But it's very important that this is shown on the letter or the transcript, etc., because an officer, if they feel like it's not accelerated, it's just a regular program, and the regular program is less than 2 academic years, remember I talked about the difference between calendar years and academic years, then they may just issue you a work permit based on, what they think is the actual length of program.
Okay, and right now with the COVID situation, people can't work. Like if I'm looking for a job, I may not be able to find one right now. Is there going to be an extension of that? So if I'm only qualifying for a 1-year work permit, will it be a little bit longer to allow me to get my year of work experience?
No, you can't count on immigration to do that. Don't think, like I said, don't think that they're going to be sympathetic to you, okay? If you have to plan on your situation as is with the current laws. And immigration has made absolutely no indication that they're going to be sympathetic to that. So if you say, well, with a 1-year work permit, I may not be able to get the 1-year work experience, then you have to consider your options as to what else you need to do. Maybe do another program, get a 3-year work permit. We can look at certain programs that you may qualify for. One of the things that you do need to understand is when you apply for your work permit, it's going to be issued from the date that the officer approves the work permit. So let's say you apply and take 6 months to get your work permit. You will buy yourself 6 months. If you apply, within the 90 days, when your study permit is still valid, you'll buy yourself 6 months of work experience until the officer gets to the work permit. Then the officer will give you 1 year from the date that they get to the work permit.
Okay. And Elizabeth, can you go over when I can work on my study permit, when that ability stops and I need to apply for the postgrad work permit, so what the hours are and when I can work?
Okay, so let's start with your attending classes. You're attending classes, you work. So now DeGroote and McMaster for grad students, you're limited by the school, right? For immigration wise, you can work part-time while you're going to study, okay? When you finish your exams and I would say when you finish your exam, I would say you can still work part-time. When you get your exam results back and the school says, oh, you finished your program, then you finished your program. You're no longer a full-time student, you have to stop working. If you want to work again, you can then take that, indication that you've finished your program and start working again as soon as you've submitted your postgrad work permit online. You can start working on that day, okay? But if you haven't submitted it properly, if you don't submit it, don't work, okay?
Perfect. And so right now, if someone has already, let's say, been approved for their permanent residence, so they have their COPR, but they haven't been able to land and become a permanent resident yet because of the immigration offices being closed, do they need to be applying? Does the COPR give them status?
The COPR, until you have actually landed, you do not have permanent residence yet. So if you have not landed yet, and they are starting to email COPRs, and they're doing things, they are starting to land people in Canada remotely by email, by phone, etc. So that's coming. But until you have that, if your work permit is going to expire, apply to extend your work permit. Make sure you are in status until you actually land.
Fantastic. I think those are the questions that I have for you today.
Excellent. Lisa, are you there?
Yes, I am. Elizabeth, Zia, thank you so very much. Again, I think this has been a great start of information. I know this is a very important process to get correct. Again, thank you for sharing your website and your online social media channels. I encourage our students in our MPhil and our MBA programs to stay connected with you socially. And of course, if anybody wants to take the step of having a private consultation, I want to thank your firm for offering DeGroote students a special rate. Again, guys, thank you so much. I will just say from a program perspective, we obviously cannot provide you the letter that you have completed your program until you have cleared to graduate. So please remember that you have not finished your program on the day you write your last exam. There's still a process that happens. So I know we get a lot of requests, and please know that when we do begin and complete the Clear to Graduate process, we will be communicating to MBA students. You'll see it in the bulletin. I'm sure Susan Vaughn for the MPhil program will share her process. And then if we are still all working remotely, please don't worry. We will make sure you get your letters virtually. We're on it. So thank you again, Elizabeth. Thank you, Zia. Thank you to all the students and all the staff who are online today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Lisa. Take care, guys. Stay safe,
Thanks,
stay healthy.
everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.